All right, so I've got my notebook here because there's a lot to cover. I've gone through a bunch of different articles, kind of put together as much of the information as I could about who was on this list, because it wasn't just one customer that launched 143 satellites. In fact, even SpaceX sent 10 of their own Starlink satellites on that mission. And this idea of ride sharing into space is obviously not new. We know people use ride sharing in real life. It's a real application. Obviously, not now in the time of COVID. That industry has definitely taken a hit. But we were using ride sharing for people that couldn't afford the money to put down for a car and to have their own, or maybe they wanted to get place to place without using public transport, or even just that wasn't available. Right? It was a budget-friendly way of getting around, and it was very popular, and it gave a lot of people a lot of value. No different here from this Transporter 1 program, but also just this whole idea of sending small satellites into orbit. And SpaceX is by no means new to this party or one of the first. They just happen to be doing it because it brings money, and there's a lot of value for it, and they have an amazing vehicle to bring it up there, and they're already a big player in the industry. And they obviously have the engineers behind them to do something crazy, like launch 143 of these at a time and still track them and help make sure that they get to orbit safely. There's plenty of other people. I mean, NASA created a whole new tier of launch providers just for CubeSat and small satellite deployment into space. There's companies like Firefly and Rocket Lab, and even the Space Launch System was intended to basically send a original mission, whether it's Artemis going to the moon or anywhere else. They would also be able to have the capability of launching different satellites, cube satellites, into different orbits. There's a mission we came across the other day called the lunah-map, LUNAH, and it's basically looking for hydrogen on the dark sides of the moon, and it would be a cube satellite mission. It's one of the first to actually launch into space. So an actual team of people in college, which is very similar to what I did, but they're super close to actually be able to launch. And one of those missions literally is a small satellite, something like this size. This is literally a cube satellite, and we'll get into more about this here, but this is just how simple this idea is sending something that's very, very small, compact. You get to send a bunch of people into space. That is the value here, is going into space without having to need a whole bunch of money to do so. That is the game that's being played here in the industry. Transporter 1 did that pretty much flawlessly. So let's go through some of the stats here. Again, we talked about this before. 143 satellites were deployed from a whole bunch of different people, businesses, companies, organizations. The previous record was held by India, where they released 104 spacecraft in one mission, and that was back in 2017. This happened last Sunday at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that would have been January 24th of this year, 2021. It's also the 73rd recovery of a Falcon 9. So just showing you how versatile having a reliable rocket to go to orbit, especially low Earth orbit around Earth itself, can be for a company, and how lucrative that can be. And interestingly enough, so those 142 satellites deployed within 59 to an hour and a half, 59 minutes to an hour and a half after the launch happened. And that's the real magic of the space industry and launching into space, right? It really does happen pretty quickly when you consider, I could drive 30 minutes and not even be outside of my own state, right? The fact that they can be in orbit in under an hour is insane. And one of the interesting things, especially about this Transporter 1 program, what SpaceX is offering essentially is that you can launch up to 150 kilograms at $2.2 million. So you need to put down $2.2 million to send one of your satellites. Again, utilizing something small and compact like this CubeSat here that NASA provided this 3D model that I 3D printed, thanks to our lab, AG3D. You can check out more about us at ag3d-printing.com, but we'll talk about that more later. But there's different variations you could do with this satellite, right? You can have one of these. You can stack a bunch of them up. You could have like 3 of these tall. There's also other variations where we've seen people will go 3 of these tall and 2 wide. So you've got 6 CubeSats, and you're able to put the components inside have little openings on the side, as you can see here, where you can literally have power here. You have your solar cells all over, so you can get power. And that's what this mission did, is it deployed these satellites into sun-synchronous orbit, so that they're always going around the Earth and facing the sun all the time. Regardless of whether the Earth is spinning, they'll be able to face the sun, so they get to use the power from those solar panels, which means they don't necessarily need all that extra fuel and stuff to move around or power. They're able to get that in that specific orbit. And it's pretty cool because the Falcon 9 actually flew south down by the poles because it was deploying it into that orbit. And it's a really rare kind of launch because you've got to, I was reading in one of the articles, you've got to thread the needle between Florida and Cuba as you're flying by. And so it's not, you're flying over land, right? It's not like the coast of Florida, you're just flying off into the water, and if something happens, you at least dump into the ocean. This is flying over land, so it's a real cool visual opportunity for the people down in Florida. It's a really valuable orbit for something like this. And if you really think about it, the fact that $2.2 million to launch something into space is the rideshare price shows you just how expensive and how out of reach going to space and utilizing low Earth orbit or gathering research that's needed from space, being in a space environment. $2.2 million is a lot of money, and this is cheap for that. And just specifically for the Transporter 1 program from SpaceX, again, there's other opportunities here from people like Firefly and Rocket Lab, but you can go up to 150 kilograms for $2.2 million. And then you basically, for an extra kilogram, you're basically looking at $15,000 or $20,000 more for every kilogram after that 150. So, the name of the game here is really, really small. These CubeSats make it happen.